banking in Honduras. So if you were thinking about moving here, vacationing here, getting your residency, getting cash out at any point, knowing the banking rules and banking options is always a good thing. And most of my funny stories at the time, well, not at the time, they're very frustrating at the time. Most of my funny stories in Roatan have something to do with the banks. I do a lot of short form videos on the banks. So if you want to see the short form shenanigans that I get myself into all the time, those are over on Shorts or over on TikTok. But let's talk about banking in, well, a little bit more comprehensive sense. So banking in Honduras, which you have to do if you do want to become a resident here, if you want to retire here, any work here, any of those things, you do have to have a valid banking account. And also if, well, you can use any ATMs, but you are charged a lot. ATM fees are expensive, and then the conversion fee is also expensive. So if you do want to avoid those and you're in this country for long enough, it might behoove you to get a bank account. So with bank accounts in Honduras, which is actually, well, very beneficial if you are an American or have a USD account. There are two currencies that the banks do support. It is USD and Lempira. Lempira is the Honduran currency. And then they also accept USD all of the banks. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to have access to the USD, but we are able to use both currencies, which is really convenient if you are an American. If you are, to exchange euros or Canadian dollars or anything other than those two currencies, it can be a little bit of a pain. I know changing currency or sending money over to Guatemala, even though it's right next door and they're part of the C4, there's all these agreements, it's very difficult. However, I digress. So if you are an American coming in, it's going to be a lot easier if you are not on USD or Lempira, or if that's not where your money originates. Changing over from euro or Canadian dollar can be very expensive. It sometimes adds 10% or so. So something to think about, and it's just a nice benefit if you do have a USD account. So I do know lots of people that if they are not American, they do open a US bank account. Most US bank accounts are insured for $250,000 USD, which makes things nice. We do have insurance on money in Honduras, but it's much less. It's usually $250,000 in Lempira, not in dollars. So the amount of funds is much less. So that's just, something if you're coming over from Europe or, anywhere that you don't have USD. A lot of people open bank accounts in Miami where they're able to keep USD, or it's easier to convert from whatever currency you're coming to into USD. So there's a lot on money conversion right there, because who wants to pay 10% in conversion fees? Same with ATMs. If you have the ATM fee, you have your bank fee, and then you have the conversion fee, which is really expensive. So, and life's kind of expensive right now. So if you don't have to pay those fees, that's always a good thing. So back to the bank accounts in Honduras. So USD and Lempira. There are tons of banks. I personally have banked at Diligence for over 15 years. They tend to be one of the most popular, just from a residency standpoint. It's also the branch in French Harbor is also right next to my residency attorney. So that also makes things really convenient, because once a year, I still have to get a note from the bank to send over to immigration to show that I am making my monthly deposits, which is part of my residency requirement. Not all residency requirements are the same. But anyway, I've used Diligence where I have a USD and a Lempira account. My USD account is the one that's attached to the residency. And I would say if you have any questions on that, definitely talk to your residency attorney, because I am not one. The rules are constantly changing, and I just usually say, try to put out some good vibes so I can just get my residency renewed every year, and I just do what everyone tells me to do. So it just makes my life easier. There's a lot of other banks, BAC, that's where a lot of businesses do their banks, Lafis, Atlantida. There's so many banks in Roatan and Honduras in general. And it really depends on, whichever one's closest to your house seems to be the best. And each bank is gonna have their own rules. So the rules with the banks here, they change all the time. And I personally don't know when they're gonna make changes, but something that's gonna help you if you are new to opening accounts. Usually there's a lot of restrictions on the first 6 months that you have a bank here. So I would, if you are considering getting a bank account in Honduras, get it sooner rather than later. And the bank fees are relatively low to keep money. And actually, if it's a savings account, it does have a very tiny bit of interest every month. Like I'm talking a penny or two, maybe 5 on a good day or a good month. But it is nice to get that started because your account, it's not going to be easy access. It is going to have limitations on it, and every bank is going to be different. One of the many reasons that I've had Davivienda and the BAC, mostly for the locations and running my business. I've always had the business accounts at BAC because I like their credit card machines a little bit better. Now, so everything is very nuanced, and I'll try to be as specific, but also kind of broad strokes, if you will. So I won't be talking to you for about an hour and a half talking about all the banking things. However, I digress again. So keep that in mind. You're going to have a lot of limitations the first 6 months that you open an account, and make sure you ask when you open that account, what's your daily limit? How much can you deposit at a time? Can you deposit USD? Can you deposit lempiras? Is there a daily limit you can deposit? Is there a daily limit you can also take out? Every bank's going to be different, and I'm also going to tell you a little secret. Each person that you ask at the bank has a lot of discretion, so they're probably going to tell you a different amount. So well, at first you don't succeed, try again. If one teller isn't giving you what you want, don't make a scene. Leave the bank, come back, get a different teller, or go to a different branch. You might get a little bit different answer, and it's just, there's a lot of discretion, and so you just want to be polite and just try to figure out what's going on, because you're going to get a different answer at any time. Every time I go to the bank, I get a different answer. And then you're also going to have so physically pulling out money, you're going to have limits on that. And then you're also going to have limits on how much you can transfer online. And you do want to make sure you do. And just because you open a bank account does not mean you actually have online access. That is something you also have to apply for and get. So all of those standard features that, well, coming from a US bank, you don't always get those down here. We do have most of those options, and banking has come a long way. I'm really happy with Davivienda when they don't, but I have lots of stories over the last 15 years where I wasn't super happy with Davivienda. Like, well, we'll go a quick sidebar is with signatures. So something else to think about. Practice writing your name. If you have a name like Lauren Hughes Schneiderwind, which that is a 12-letter last name, it's a lot of letters, and I have to write it the same every single time. I'm also left-handed. My handwriting is awful. So after 3 hours contemplating, begging, pleading, always being polite, I am now allowed to print my name when I go into the bank, so they no longer ask me for my signature, because my signature is never the same. So if you ever want to ask anyone about banking, if you're at a bar or at a restaurant or just out and you're like, how do you like the banking in Roatan or in Honduras? You're probably going to get some snide remarks about the signature. So practice your signature, make sure it's the same. If you have one in your passport, you better sign it the exact same way every single time. And if it's off by just a little bit, you don't get your money, you don't get to do any of your banking, and they're just going to tell you, sorry. So that's why I print my name, and I can print my name legibly and, well, the same way every single time. But that took me months, actually years of pleading to be able to print my name. And just one day, one nice person was just rolled her eyes at me, thought I was a moron, and was just like, you know what, you can just print your name from now on. And I'm like, oh, yes, why couldn't I have gotten this done sooner? Anyway, I digress. So it's a lot about signatures and making sure your signature is the same. And if we have time, I'll tell you the best signature story I heard. But anyway, back to banking and back to the rules. So what is also going to help when you open up a bank account, you're going to need 2 vouch letters by, usually you want Honduran citizens, or that's who I use, or that's who I like to have sign for things. You can have Honduran residents as well. But I've also had people come into the bank and physically vouch for me. So I've had my residency attorney who is in French Harbor right next to the Davidienda. Go in and say, hey, you know, she's legit or she's fine. Can you unlock some features? One of which is the online banking, the online transfer to do USD and Lempira. So you do have to ask for every single item that you want, and it's not just given to you like when you open a bank account in the US, and every bank is going to be a little bit different. But when I've physically gone and have someone, because when you open the bank account well, every time I've opened a bank account, I've needed 2 letters from people just vouching for me, writing a little saying, yeah, this, you know, this is Lauren, blah, blah, blah. But what helps more is if I have someone actually physically come into the bank, especially if they are an attorney, or I've had many builders come in and be like, hey, she's going to be releasing money to me. Like, we need to let those go. And then, and if you are building a house, be aware that if you are sending more money than they are expecting you to send, or moving more money than they expect, they can also freeze your account for an undetermined amount of time, which means you have no access to it at all. It won't show up in the online banking. When you go to the account, they're like, it's been frozen. I had my account frozen for 2 to 3 weeks a few months ago when I was building the project that you can see right behind here, because I was sending too much money out or in and out. There was a lot of movement of money, and it kind of freaked them out. And so I had to justify what I was doing, even though they already had, like I gave them, whenever you're sending large amounts of money, I would give them the permit. I would just let the bank know. You almost have to give them a lot of information that maybe is not always, in my opinion, their business, but it will make your life a lot better. I had even shown them the permit. I was like, this is how much money I'm going to be sending over the next 6 months. This is, you know, this is it. They still froze my account, and I had to justify it. I had to show them the progress on the house, even though it was my money and I wasn't taking out a loan. It was just, I had to show them all these things, showing or justifying why I was bringing in so much money from the US and then sending it out in Lempira. So anyway, that's a lot of information about the bank accounts, but you want to make sure you're clear with everything from the get-go, and every bank is going to be a little bit different. I know other banks, Davidienda does limit the amount I can send out per person per day, which is 10,000 USD. The limit is the same. It's 250, $250,000 Lempiras a day. So I do have that limit. That limit just came into effect about 6 months ago. And really, well, if you're spending that much money, that's, you know, those are kind of good problems to have, I'd say. I digress. The other banks will limit it a lot more. I know some banks do a $1,500 a day, especially if you're trying to pull out cash. I've never had issues trying to pull out cash when I go into the branch at Davidienda, except during COVID, because it was just, it was a weird time and everyone was conserving cash. And a lot of the time, and I was able to get anything that I wanted out because I was paying staff. And so I was able to just say, they were just trying to conserve money and make sure that there's still money in the bank. So it was a weird time. So we can talk for hours about the weird things that happened during COVID, but it doesn't matter where you were, they were all weird. But back to the banking. So make sure you check all of those things that I would say I take for granted in the United States over banking limits, how much you can deposit, when you can deposit, how much you can deposit. It does vary from bank to bank. That's why I've used Davidienda. They also Davidienda historically has also been the most friendly to foreigners. Not all banks will allow foreigners to open a bank account. So you do want to make sure that they allow foreigners. And then once you have residency, you're going to have a lot more options as well, just because you have more options. If you're a Honduran citizen, you can bank anywhere and you do not have the limitations from a foreigner coming in. So just some things to think about, and make sure you do follow whatever rules there are, and they change. My biggest advice is just find a branch that you like, find a person that you like. Always be kind, even if you are so freaking annoyed after standing there for 3 hours, because it happens, it will happen. It's one of those things. So that's just, there's a lot to do with the banking, and it can be frustrating, but I would just, take it. Banking is different. So expect the lines, expect the waits. I personally Don't need to tell you where, well, anyway, I have my favorites. Some days are better than others. I don't like to go to the bank on payday. That's just, the 1st and the 15th of the month. Otherwise, it's going to be a disaster, or the day right before, because you have businesses depositing money before they send out the money to their staff. So things of that nature, which it's just, you'll get to know, you'll get to see, you'll get to love the island. And, some days are better than others with most things. But overall, I'm very happy with the bank. It's taken me many years to get to a place where the bank trusts me. They know, like, I have my privileges. They're not revoked. But if you do have anything, I've never had any money missing, or if I had, it's always been there. I've had some wires go. Also, again, during 2020 when things got weird, and I'm like, I just sent this money. I need it. And they did. Once I went to the bank, they're like, oh yeah, we have it. We just didn't put it in your account. And it's like, all right. So patience goes a long way, which I don't personally always have, but I'm getting better every day. And so I have people at the banks that do know me, and being kind is going to help a lot, because everyone behind the counter working there does have a lot of discretion. So be nice, and it goes a lot longer than not. And that's just like many things, like immigration, kindness goes a long way. Even if it doesn't always benefit you, it's always good to be kind. So that's the long story on the banks. It's just make sure you ask the questions and you get it set up from the get-go, because if it's set up wrong, you might as well just shut it down and start it over again. So just make sure you get it done right from the beginning. Watch those signatures and make sure you do know the limits, how much money you can take out, remove. If there's any waiting periods, there's always that 6-month period, but ask them all of those questions, especially if you're doing USD and Lempira. It is nice and convenient to have both accounts, and you're going to have to ask for both accounts. Up to you on how much you keep. If you are an American and you have more than $10,000 in any account, you do have to declare it when you file your taxes, which you do legally have to file in the United States. It's one of the only countries, I think maybe the only country, that does tax its citizens even when they don't live in the country. But you get $100,000 and some write-off, and if you're married, it's double that. So that's about it. And I will end you, if you are still watching this video, thank you so much. I've talked a lot about the banks. Hopefully a lot of good information, but if one thing, that dang signature, make sure your signature is the same. It's going to make your life a lot better. And the last thing I'm going to end you with is one of the best stories I've heard about the banks, where it's all in good fun right now. I had a friend who was depositing 4,000 USD into the bank, but actually just wanted it exchanged for Lempiras. But how the bank does it here, they don't just do a pure exchange for you, and you also have to have that history, otherwise they will not do it. So he physically gives them $4,000 in USD, asks them to convert it, but they have to deposit the USD first into your account, and then they transfer it to Lempira, and then you can physically change the money out. However, he did a signature on the deposit. The lady was like, okay, yep, that's you. It deposited the money. And then when he went to pull it out in Lempira, which they knew what he was doing the entire time, they actually refused to give him money out because his signature did not match. They said they weren't sure it was him, even though it was him the whole time. And sorry, it's one of the funniest stories I've ever heard. And it's funny just because I've been in that situation so many times. It's never funny at the time, but you get things like that can be, I don't know, frustrating, or you're just like physically give them the money and then they won't give it back because they said they can't verify your signature. And it's one of those bank things where they have to verify the signature, otherwise they can't give you the money. And so watch that damn signature. If you listen to nothing else in this story, get the signature right. So thank you guys for tuning in. If you ever have any questions, I know I talked a lot about banking. Hopefully you got some valid tidbits on just make sure you ask all of the right questions and be kind. It is going to make your life much, much better. And also be patient. Don't run tight. Don't expect to do anything else that day.